Belief in God. The Jobian Christianity of Jesus the Jew. In the Hebrew Bible story of Job, a man of that name who is renowned for his diligent piety and worship of God, who looks down on him with favor and has rewarded him with good fortune and wealth, is, with God's permission, tempted by Satan to renounce God through visitations upon him of great hardship, loss, and sickness. The Christian might see this as a prefiguring of Jesus' suffering on the cross. Job is visited by good friends who tell him that God would never be unjust and that he must have done something to deserve his suffering. Job protests his friends' counsel, insisting that he's innocent and that he deserves an explanation from God. The first three friends pitch much the same line, but then a fourth, Elihu, more emphasizes the greatness of God and the ultimate incomprehensibility to us of his actions. Elihu rebukes Job for his apparent arrogance in regarding himself fit to demand an explanation from God. Before Elihu has finished his argument, God directly intervenes and scolds Job's friends for their faithlessness to him and their lack of faith, especially Elihu's, in human knowledge. For God knows very well that Job is innocent and that Job knows this too and has been right to stand by what he knows. God knows that his suffering has not been a punishment but a test. Even though Job hasn't understood this latter aspect of his suffering, he has nevertheless passed the test by keeping faith with God. And as regard God's infinite and incomprehensible majesty, which Elihu emphasized, God now repeats much the same arguments as Elihu's, but this time Job accepts them. Why? Why Job's change of heart? It is not because of what's being said, but because of who is saying it. Job finally explains, before I only heard of you with the hearing of my ears, but now that I have seen you with my own eyes, I understand and repent. The problem has been that although Job's religious observance has been exemplary, he has not truly known God. Now that he has, which incidentally supports present-day rabbinical Judaism's rebuttal that there is no redemption outside the church of the historical Jesus, he surrenders to him completely and without further questioning. Jesus' first words to his disciples in the Gospels were, "Come and see," by which I think he meant, come and be as I am and see God as Job saw him with his own eyes. In other words, Jesus' way of being himself, if we accept it, is the way for all of us to truly be ourselves. And the moment we remember Jesus as he actually was, recognizing ourselves in him and unreservedly accepting him as our model, we immediately know God both as Jesus and as our own true self. It isn't that God resides in some deep recess in our being, like a soul within our soul, but rather that, as St. Paul said, we have our entire being in God's, so that he's the very substance of everything that we are. It's my faith that this is the reality we awaken to the moment we authentically renounce our sinfulness and surrender to Jesus' perfect humanity. At that moment in which we truly become ourself, we completely abandon our self-centered self, knowing that we are not of ourself, but of he who, in giving himself to us in every moment of our life, gives us ourself in those same moments. In passing, I believe this is the essence of the Hindu conception of everything being illusion, maya, and the Buddhist realization of the emptiness of self, which later forms of Buddhism reframed as emptiness of other, that is, as the emptiness of absolute being of anything other than itself. Contrary to Western and even Buddhist misconceptions of Buddhism, this teaching didn't deny the reality or uniqueness of our ordinary world, but rather recognized that essentially it isn't at all ordinary. The actual reality is that it never exists apart from or outside of absolute being, great emptiness, the unconditioned, or what the Judeo-Christian tradition calls God, who, as long as creation exists, gives it its existence. All of these names refer to the same fundamental reality, their respective paths necessarily converging on the same understanding of it, something that can easily be tested by comparing them to each other. Through their various more or less important differences, the ultimate foundational reality common to all looms large. This is true of Islam as well, which deserves to be treated separately elsewhere.